Says we're live.
All right. I feel
Says
alive.
we're live. I feel live. Let's see. I'm going over to Substack to make sure we're live, so we're not talking to the wall. Although I love just talking to you. You know, if that's
All good. As long as it's recorded in case we drop some gems as we go. Odds of that for me are always a little iffy, but I'm sure we'll be fine.
All right, it's official. We are in fact live. Roy Bahat, what's going on, brother? Good to see you.
I am so happy that you do this. Honestly, like we need to be taking some shots on trying to figure this stuff out. So wherever this conversation goes, I'm ready.
I'm also finding this sounds like shade. Maybe it is a little bit shade, but I don't mean it to be. There's like a world where like us like Democratic strategists talk, and it's like I'm like in whiteboards in these random offices, and there's like these big ideas that never get out there. And then there's like the democracy influencer world that isn't necessarily like you and I in my previous life, I didn't know anyone in the democracy like influencer world, but they're the ones communicating with the public. And if I can marry those a little bit more in like, this is how like the non-K Street thinkers are thinking about the next 10 to 20 years in this country and how we can build a bigger, brighter future to you know, getting those conversations out to the public a little bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I'll just say I think just named the pain that that is in the seam that I live in, which is to say, like, you know, my day job is I'm a startup investor. And so I'm talking to folks in the Bay Area about their visions for the future. And sometimes it's like they sound like they're literally with a periscope into a brighter day that the rest of us can see. And sometimes people sound like space aliens. And then, you know, it's like you go talk to folks elsewhere, and we're part-time in Milwaukee, which is where I'm sitting right now. And it's like, I kind of wish everybody just understood each other. And I don't want to be so naive that I'm like, whoa, can't we all just get along? Because there are different interests and issues at play, and let's not like gloss over that. But a lot of it is just a little more understanding the language each other speaks. So I'm ready to try.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, tell Kip, for the folks that don't know you, because you and I aren't influencers, so people haven't met us before. Who are you, Roy Bahat? What have you been up to?
Influence me, and I will try to influence you. So my name is Roy Bahat. I run a venture capital firm that invests in startups called Bloomberg Beta. We invest in startups that make work better. And so some startups that we've invested in that people know are things like Masterclass, you know, the online education company, Slack, we were small investors in. We're investors in Replit, which is a leading vibe coding company where you can, you know, build a bunch of stuff. We've been investing in AI since 2014. So that's kind of the core of what I do is I support startup founders making work better in a range of ways. I mean, yesterday, one of the companies we backed early on got a contract for almost $900 million with the FAA to modernize air traffic control. So it's like a super wide range of things. But then, you know, I want to make sure the world that we build things in works for everybody. And so I spend a lot of time trying to advocate for a more stable, healthy society. And I spend especially a lot of time with organized labor. I'm part of a group of donors, as you know, for everybody here, called Democracy Takes Work, that backs experiments in labor organizing. And while that's very different from my startup brain, it shares a similarity that like what I'm drawn to is people trying long shots that might make things much better if they work. And I see that in everything from, you know, the people trying to organize a new union at Starbucks or organizing within the tech industry to fight the influence of ICE to, you know, an entrepreneur trying to make a shipping broker.
And yeah, I think I'm happy you added that second half because, you know, I think there didn't used to be this tension, but now Silicon Valley is like starting to become the new Wall Street in some ways. It's like it's where the baddies live, and they don't care about you.
The way I'll put it is, and I don't think Wall Street had quite this thing, but I grew up in New York, you know, during the rise of Wall Street, so I experienced some of this secondhand, and it is similar in the sense of like, you know, just this ascendant group. But, you know, there was this line that Steve Jobs used to say about how it's more fun to be a pirate than to be in the Navy. And it captured this identity of people in Silicon Valley of like, hey, we're the nerds, we're the attackers, we want to upend the broken old ways. And there's truth in that, but it used to be a lot less complicated. And the reason it's complicated now is like, what do you do when the pirates end up as the admirals?
Yeah. Yeah. When they take over it's a good way to put it. Look, a lot of like I grew up in the Bay Area, right? And I was a tech entrepreneur. I built a couple tech companies.
Yeah.
There was a not facetious, like pro democracy energy around the internet, period. It was about getting, information to people, connecting people, like those. It sounds like bullshit now, those goals, like as a means of like a corporate line to go, have a positive corporate image to then go win market share somewhere. But it was really like the driving,
I think it was
animating
authentic.
force, for
Totally.
the tech industry.
Well,
And
because
then
there weren't obvious rewards to doing it in the beginning.
that,
Like the
yes.
only reason you could do it, or not the only, but a major reason to do it was either belief in a better future, or honestly, some of it was just tradecraft of like people who just loved building things and loved building things quickly and just got professional joy out of their craftspersonship.
And then it became Wall Street in the sense that it was a casino. Like if you could get into the casino, you could win. You could win huge house. Financially.
And
you
I'm
could be the house.
Your diagnosis of what changed. So some of it is the money, but like I'd love to hear because I didn't grow up here, and I grew up in New York, but I'd love to hear your diagnosis of what changed.
I think you just nailed it. I think it was kind of like weirdos and geeks, like that were building experimental things, and people animated by increased access was kind of like the promise of the internet. Is like that really expensive thing or that thing that's far away. It could be here in front of you and cheap. Right. And like that extended all the way through. Like, I would say my high point was pretty late. It was like the Arab Spring. It was like Google was doing its thing. The iPhone was making internet, or smartphones were making the internet accessible to like lots and lots and lots of people who couldn't afford computers, and doing things that computers couldn't do. And then Twitter was this like animating factor behind a lot of the Arab Spring, where all of a sudden in places where the public couldn't communicate, clearly, or easily, they started organizing with it and like overthrowing dictators. That was like my peak optimism.
Yeah, and I think that one of the interesting things there was, so I moved to Silicon Valley just before the global financial crisis. And so in the hangover from that, it was not a foregone conclusion that tech as an industry was going to work. I mean, obviously, there were certain companies that were already very big and successful. Google, Facebook was already successful then, if it wasn't, what Meta is today. But it was very much like still an open question. And I think, like, to me, one of the major things that changed was power and how people respond to having power. Like, it's one thing if you are the outcast and you're like, hey, I want to have power because the wrong people have it. And then, it's sort of like a classic, almost Animal Farm kind of tale of what do you do once you're the person who has the power? And I think that what happened for a lot of people in tech is as they built their power, they didn't realize that was going to put different demands on them. But when you're powerless, people are a lot less skeptical of what you have to say. Once you're powerful, it's like, why can't we just egg you on and encourage you? Is because if you're wrong, a lot of people could get hurt.
Right.
And so for me, the word that has been the kind of defining watchword of this era politically, but also in the corner that I see in the tech industry, is how do people respond when they have power? It's a fucking hell of a drug.
I think that's a bit, and like on top of that, this is the place where tech is probably even worse than Wall Street, because it's weird people who get into tech. It's like kind of antisocial, sometimes on the spectrum people.
Yeah,
those people having insane power like gets very weird. We see with
and by the way, that can be good and bad. Like, I think what's so difficult about all of this is it's not unambiguously one way. Like, the nerd with a big heart who ends up with a lot of power can do a lot of good in the world and can make unusual choices. And, I love the ethos elements of Silicon Valley that, a failure doesn't scar you forever. It's okay to challenge the status quo. And that's a very San Francisco thing too. What I think is, back to the Wall Street contrast, because I think it's such a good one. I think the other factor is on Wall Street, nobody ever made any bones about why they were there. Nobody was there on Wall Street.
It was honest.
It was honest. It was straightforward. They're like, I'm there to make a bunch of money. And by the way, I think that's fine if that's what somebody's goal is. I think that one of the challenges in tech is that we often have inauthentic motives because people are clearly acting based on what's right for their pocketbook while claiming to do it because it's what's best for the world. And that inauthenticity, a person who's not in the middle of it, it just smacks as phony, obviously, and deters people. And so the question to me is, when you have so much money sloshing around, how can you set up systems? How can people discover their own power to act in a way where they're at least honest about what it is that they want and trying to get it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The other thing I think when you talk about the us turning on the tech industry, there was a problem with tech that goes back to like way before my time, right? When you think of like the Jetsons, or you look at like the commercials of a microwave. If you look at like an ad when a microwave came out, it was always like a woman with her feet kicked up drinking like a lemonade. And it's basically like the machines you're going to move towards a future that is less laborious because the machines are going to handle things for us moving forward. And that didn't happen in our personal lives. Like we created more tasks. Like like my washing machine's running now. I didn't stop doing shit in my house because my washing machine's running. So that didn't happen in our personal lives. And our governments didn't really leverage it to liberate us, right? We didn't. John Maynard Keynes talked about going to a 10-hour work week by 2000. He's like, why stop at 40? We just made 40. Why? If we can accomplish all the things we need to accomplish, and we never defined that clearly as a society, except for COVID. COVID, we named essential and non-essential work is the one time we go, maybe a lot of this shit we're doing isn't actually all that important. And we just need to make sure we're fed and housed and have medical care and whatnot. But I guess I'm saying all that to say, technology went from something that even in my childhood, I believed would liberate us from a laborious life to something that I now am concerned about losing sources of income because of and being surveilled by. So that relationship,
I think you've named, a deep aspect of it. And I guess my take on it is all technology has always been both liberatory and controlling at the same time. Like it's true for a revolutionary with a gun. It's true for the printing press. The more you zoom out, I think the more in the long run it's good. And the more you zoom in, it can be completely destructive. And, people like, for example, when it comes to AI and its effect on work, like there's a certain class of commentators and economists, especially, who love to say, well, if you look at technologies, net employment always rises over time. And that's true in the long run. The problem is, if you have to go through losing your livelihood and facing your kids and saying, your parents can't figure out how to, get you the toys you wanted for Christmas, then, the total employment numbers don't matter. And in the Industrial Revolution, we arguably had several world wars that followed from that, that's just the transition. Well, the transition is really important. And I think that what protects us during transitions are the institutions that we have. It's government, it's civil society. It was in another era more often labor unions.
Yes.
And the fact that we have this period of intense technological change with AI as a lightning rod capturing our attention, but also meaningfully changing things, and the weakness of institutions, and more important than just the weakness, the failure of the institutions to keep the trust of typical people, is this really dangerous cocktail. And why I'm so focused on how do we create together structures that enable ordinary people to be powerful. The ballot box is one mechanism, but it's infrequent and deeply imperfect. There are other mechanisms. And one of the reasons I'm so drawn to innovation and organizing is because I see that's what young people are doing, taking matters often into their own hands, not necessarily union organizing, but sometimes that. And one of the reasons I'm drawn to AI is I think that it's a thing that people, like the most empowered people using AI, have become more powerful than they were. They have a sense of personal authorship over their life that is greater than it was. And it's not to say everybody who experiences AI that, sees that. Obviously, a lot of people are deeply distressed, by it. Like you see the comments on like a TikTok video about AI and everybody's like, I don't want to touch this stuff. And people walking out of, commencement speeches and stuff like that. And so I guess it's a really long way of saying the unfortunate answer as we make America nuanced again is that it's both liberatory and controlling.
I think you put it so masterfully. Like, even if you go back to agriculture as a technology, right? Agriculture was massively restricting in some ways, right? You used to move around all the time. There's so much freedom.
Now you got to stay and water the seeds.
And like, it took hard, depending on the season, it took like hard, laborious work. Where hunting and gathering, I think there was a study on like the Kung tribe, I think it was in Africa, and they worked like 8 hours a week, essentially. Like when they looked at like, now they had much more risk because they could go through food shortages in a couple days time, and like, but you had that. And then it was the introduction of war, because now there is these static places that other groups could come and take stuff. And so you're right, it's always, so I think you're right in that there's always these kind of risks and rewards in these technological transitions. But then you named it. I think you named the most important thing, which is it's really about the transition. And does everyone feel like they can be relatively safe in that transition? Do they feel like they're going to be maybe better for that transition? And do we have the institutions in place that allow us to be resilient through that transition? And the answer is no, right? It's not about the tech. It's actually about the institutions and their ability to like regulate it, keep us safe while we're going through it, all that.
And we're so close. I mean, like I just say, I was active early on in organizing about what's now called guaranteed income.
Yeah.
And, my observation of the history of
where are you so fucking early and stuff? You're like a 2014 AI investor. When we called it machine learning back then. For people who don't know, it wasn't even called AI.
In fact, our first blog post about it, we called it machine intelligence because we didn't want to be restricted to just machine learning, and AI seemed too negative of a term then. Now I'll just say, I was opposed to that at the time within our firm.
Yeah.
I was like, nah, it's too early. Like, you've been reading too much sci-fi. Like, weed just got legalized in California, and I was wrong. And a woman on my team was the one who pointed it out, Siobhan Zillis. And now what I recognized quickly that I was wrong, and we had a culture of, if you think it's the right thing to do, just do it. But part of the reason I point that out is I don't consider myself to be like some fortune teller. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but what I know how to do is pay attention to people who are innovating at the edges. And that used to be the freaks and geeks in tech. It sometimes still is, obviously. But one of the reasons why I'm drawn to looking at what outcast innovators want is I think that's where you see the signs of the future. And, guaranteed income was that, and we'll see it may, return. As you said, during COVID, we had a bunch of restructurings, and the child tax credit was arguably a form of guaranteed income. But when I look at the history, here are a few things I observe. One is, over time, the institutions tend to offer more and more. So we didn't have public roads, and now we do. Most countries didn't have public health care, but now most do. And so the trend is good. The US is so close to being able to provide this stuff. The wealth we have as a country, the talent we have as a country, the attractiveness, if we can get immigration policies right, to people from around the world. Like, I remain committed to the task because I think we're so close. And what I see shifting is, in addition to the economics, in addition to the, the technological trend, the culture shifts. So I'll give you an example. If you look at old ads for technology, it predicts a lot of what we have. Like, there are ads from the World's Fair that are like, and then you will be able to use your computer to shop. And, and we can. What it didn't predict was the cultural change. So it was like, and the men will approve the bill while the woman shops. And it's like, no, women are much more powerful than they were, even though there's a long way to go, obviously. And here we are, two like white guys talking to each other. There's obviously a long way to go. But the culture shift, and I'll just name one particular element, which is, you talked about a shorter work week. I think many of us already have that. And let me describe what I mean. My great grandparents would not look at what you and I are doing right now and say we are working.
Mhm.
They would say it looks like leisure. Look at them. They're talking about the world. They're doing what guys used to do sitting in front of the coffee shop. It's just that we think of it as work because we've set up this economic structure
Professionalized it.
and we get paid. And so
Mhm.
like, but that is what the future, I don't care so much how many hours a week we spend working, because I think that's a cultural labeling thing. What I care a lot about is, do people feel fulfilled with their days? Do they feel empowered to control their own lives? Can they feed their families? ... And so to me, that's the call for all of us, is how do we set up a world where, like, if you're working, you don't starve. And if you're working, you feel good about it. And it's simple things that just take a lot of work to get to. Anyway, that's my dime store psychology on the long-term history of all this.
It's great. I want to get into your current take on labor organizing and the work you're doing. But I want to challenge you,
please.
With like one flip on that. I think I agree. Over time, our institutions do get stronger, and we raise the floor and we add new programs, especially as like technology in some ways allows us to execute on those programs in cheaper ways, right? It's easier to produce, it's easier to distribute. You need less of your societal resources to get it done, right? I wonder if one of those narratives we just bumped into, as you were explaining, which is like, if you work, you can have food. And I wonder if there's a world where we go, look, the food production thing is fucking easy. We don't need to withhold food, in fact, what we know now, and I was just getting to this on my last call. In fact, what we know now is, to win the 21st century, we need people in an abundant headspace so they can be having work days like this. You know what I mean?
I should clarify. I don't want to say you need to be able to work. You're
a guaranteed income guy. I know you didn't mean it.
Yeah. But let me explain what I mean. I don't think a person who expends the effort to try to participate in our broader society should starve, period. And I don't think anybody should starve. But the fact that we have people who are doing what society asks them to do, working hard, who still can't make it work, is a failure of the design of our societal systems. And it's producing a lot of rage, which is why people vote for populist extremists, because of that rage.
Totally. I mean, like, one of the things I'm working on here locally is family homelessness. Oregon leads the country in family homelessness by like 3x. And like, when you talk about family homelessness, it's like a mom living out of her van with her kids, working 3 jobs. Like, the fact that person is fucking struggling to make ends meet is infuriating. All right, let's get to the future of labor organizing.
Okay.
You're actually, I am connected in spirit to the thing that one of the things you're working on, Democracy Takes Work. I helped Pamela Schiffman come up with the project at Democracy Alliance.
Awesome.
But like most things, we created the materials, we created the website, we got some of the first donors in, whatnot. But like most things, that I create, I am not a long-term operator. So if I can get it out of my hands into the hands of someone like a Sienna Chang or Leah Hunt Hendricks or Roy Bahat, it's better for it. I'm a generative person in that sense. But then I haven't been connected to it for some time now, and it's really grown, and you've really taken a big role in it. And so can you talk to me about Democracy Takes Work and what it is today?
So I believe that, I'll start from the beginning, which is, I believe a person should have as much power as possible, and that in particular, working people are less powerful than they ought to be in our society. And the question is, how can they have more power that serves their interests, to be able to, for that family that is suffering with family homelessness and working poverty, not to have to suffer with it. And many, many others, including, by the way, people who are in roles of much greater privilege, like people who joined a tech company and are like, I joined this company and didn't think I was going to be working on the stuff I'm working on that I have moral problems with. So it's a whole range of issues around people having insufficient power. And if you look at what their options are, it's like they can vote, but like I said, that's infrequent and it's clumsy because you only have so many choices, or they can take power where they are. And what I observed was lots of people trying to find new ways of doing that. Everything from college athletes, wanting a bigger share of the pie, to baristas at Starbucks, to engineers at Google. And in the US, we have a traditional model for how this kind of organizing should work, which is the labor union. And labor unions have evolved over decades to be very powerful in very particular ways. But the big labor unions are not the only model for how somebody can be powerful. And so I devoted myself to trying to study and understand how people could be powerful by organizing. And one thing I did was, at the request of some folks I know in organized labor, formed a group of business leaders who are what we call labor open. They want to forge a more constructive relationship with organized labor. And so we've got a club of private membership group of business leaders at the Aspen Institute called the Aspen Business Roundtable on Organized Labor. It's a mouthful. And that's good for like the leadership level of business. But what
it's very Aspen Institute.
Yeah,
it's a very Aspen Institute.
And Aspen's been great. They've been an incredible partner awesome on it. Yeah. And it's a very wide range of business leaders in a wide range of industries, all sort of mutually supporting each other, sharing tips and more than tips, strategies and thoughts. But then I saw that there were many of these emergent efforts to try to organize in new ways. And a lot of those were just under supported. The people doing them felt lonely. The people doing them didn't have enough money. And so, a group of people formed a donor group called Democracy Takes Work to provide money, but also, advice, guidance, relationships. And in a way that I don't want to stretch the analogy too much, but in a way that's analogous to what I would do in my day job for a startup founder. And as you said, that group was formed by Sienna Chang and Leah Hunt Hendricks, and Andrea Dellendorf is the third co-chair. I am a member. We just took a group of people, of donors, to the every 2 years labor organizing conference for the rank and file in the union world, which is called Labor Notes. And and we're looking for folks to support, and have done it in a whole wide range of different domains. And so that's my attempt to try to be an ally. Like, I am not myself a labor organizer. Like, I don't want to, speak for any group other than the groups I am in. And so I can speak for, groups of people in the tech industry at times. I can speak for donors who want to support this work, but we're looking for people who are making and building and convening to support. And so that's what Democracy Takes Work is. And as you alluded to, its first phase was being housed within the Democracy Alliance, which has a more political focus. That is not the primary focus of Democracy Takes Work anymore, but our friends, Pamela and others at the Democracy Alliance, have been incredible allies.
It's a great time to be experimental in labor organizing, because there are groups of people who have been relatively powerful as a labor force in their spaces. I'm thinking about lawyers, I'm thinking about tech employees, I'm thinking about a lot of Hollywood that are now all of a sudden under threat. And so you have this weird window where there's like all sorts of groups of society, all sorts of labor groups that have some power still totally. Still powerful people that have income.
Powerful people are scared.
Powerful people are scared. They have never been in a union, so they're not going to be wedded to how unions usually operate. So to your point, there's like opportunity to experiment in how people can have more power, right? Like, how do they work?
And by the way, finish your thought.
No, I was just like, basically, I think you and I are two of maybe like 10 people who bring Silicon Valley style experimentation into this space frequently. Maybe it's 100. I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating that. But like that same, like, let's try shit like Silicon Valley tries stuff. Like, let's throw stuff at the wall. Let's figure out what we can do. And let's go win together. I wonder, in that you kind of have an interesting petri dish, I guess is all I'm setting you up to say. And
that's it.
What are you seeing that's different about maybe past iterations on labor strength with these new communities that is now possible or working?
Okay, that's an awesome question. And so let me describe. First of all, I do want to credit the unions are also innovating. And so,
fair.
The American Federation of Teachers, where I'm a member because I have a very part-time teaching affiliation, created the country's first national training center on AI in any occupation, as far as I know, for teachers. And they did it in partnership with Microsoft and OpenAI and Anthropic. And that's not a thing you would have looked to a labor union necessarily to do.
Totally.
Many unions have done similar things for folks, for their membership, like the carpenters and the operating engineers have these incredible training facilities. But that's an experiment. Experiment isn't the right word because they're further along than that. That's a new attempt to do something.
Right.
You've got groups like the American Association of University Professors, who are not a union, but are a professional association and very muscular and fighting for what they think is the right thing for academic research and treatment of talent, dot, dot, dot. But now I'll answer the question directly. What do I see from in the Petri dish? And let me just say, I don't think this is like applying the tech stuff that works, but I do think it is adapting and encountering different ways of innovating and bringing them together, integrating them. And so, for example, one thing tech is really good at is fast experimentation. Part of a problem with that is it can produce very thin experimentation, can produce very thin relationships where you think of somebody as a member of your group because they signed on to your email list. And in a certain sense, that is membership. Like I joined the AARP years ago to just see what it was like because I knew they were a powerful and important group. And, I'm on the list and they mail me some stuff, but it's not a thick relationship. Whereas in general, organizers really pride themselves on knowing each other as people and having thicker relationships in the language of organizing. And so there's an adaptation of methods that's coming together, but I definitely think technology can be really helpful in organizing. And there's a certain kind of organizers like, I don't want to use tech. I'm old school. And it's like, nah, you're probably going to lose to people who use tech. I mean, really. Mm-hmm. And so what's different in this wave? One thing that's different is the range of people involved. So you alluded to the occupations. It's like, you got doctors scared of automation now. And so there's a very wide range in terms of seniorities, in terms of demographic backgrounds. Another thing that's fueled the range is the entry of a lot of college graduates into the working class. Noam Scheiber at the New York Times wrote this great book called Mutiny about the effect of the entry of college-educated people into the working class. So range is one thing. A second thing is the importance of the roles those people are in. So it was often the case for some organizing that the people who were organizing were in roles that were relatively powerless. They were within a corporation, not the central figures in the corporation's work. That is changing. Like I see at the AI labs, a lot of the most influential people internally are the technical researchers, and they're the ones speaking up. I wrote a piece maybe a year and a half ago, anticipating that there might be that power base of the most technical people inside the AI lab. So the criticality of the roles is the second factor. The third factor is that the people doing this are really hard to label politically. They're not left or right. They're often pragmatists. Some of them are left and some of them are right, but they don't look like a faction that you can identify. And so in that swirling mass of a wider range of people in really critical roles who are hard to label will come something special. I don't quite know what. I don't know how to point to it. It may adapt from the models of the past. Like I'll give you an example of a union model that I think is really powerful is dues. Because ultimately I think organizations serve whoever pays them. And if you're paid by philanthropy, you're going to serve the priorities of foundations. And that can be fine for getting something going. But like, I'll say the same thing for a startup. If you're dependent on VC, you're going to serve the needs of VC. The sooner you can get paid by your customers, the more aligned your interests will be with those of your customers. So that's an example of a core tenet of traditional labor organizing that I think has a lot going for it.
Case in point, the Democratic Party, who got their dues from church groups and labor unions up until through the 90s. But,
and I think money in politics has distorted a lot of this for sure for the Democrats and the Republicans. And so I think it's going to be this like holy alliance between these different methods out of which we have a shot of something special happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always, when people ask, about people's like political economic theory, right? How socialist are you? It's funny. Like sometimes that question isn't, are you socialist? But it's like, how constrained is your socialist belief? Like, is it to your neighborhood? Is it to your city?
Or to what?
Because a lot of people,
You got Donald Trump calling for owning a piece of the AI labs. That is some
yeah,
straight up state capitalism.
yeah, he's got
A lot of
intel.
European style democratic socialists would be like, yes. And you see Bernie saying similar things.
But I guess my point though is like in these odd bedfellow coalitions that are being built now, they'll still advocate for collective power of them and their peers. Like, you know what I mean? Like they will still want some sort of collective power,
but
even if it's
not over what domain of stuff.
Yeah, over what domain? That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, exactly. And so, it's good in collective power is good in general. And I think one of the things you're working on is, to your point, is like, okay, collective power over our government, local, state, federal, good, infrequent. But then a bunch of people in various, overlapping groups having more collective power in all these various domains, then builds a better system writ large, right? I'm saying it back to you to make sure I'm
you are describing exactly the dynamic that I think is at play now. And in a way, what we're really talking about when you say that collective action is we're talking about how to share power, the tradecraft of sharing power. And it's not a thing we know how to do. Almost everybody I know who is powerful is about themselves a power maximalist. They want to power max their own power. And by the way, I think that's understandable. But back to institutions, part of the goal of institutions, like we have checks and balances to make sure that even as different entities try to power max, they don't win. And, the Obama and Biden administrations did a lot of executive branch power maxing too. And so it's not necessarily a bad or a good thing when one party is trying to accumulate more power. It's bad when it gets out of balance. And I think that's the situation we have now.
I know we're coming to your last minute here. We talked about mutiny briefly, and young people having a very different experience entering the workforce right now. Just leave me with one piece of advice. Well, actually, leave Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries with one piece of advice for me. Like knowing what you know now about young people and their spirit, like a lot of the culture entering the workforce right now. What do you think they need to hear from leadership to be attracted to it? What do they believe and what do they need to hear from leadership, and what do they need to see from leadership to be organized into a political movement?
All right, let me caveat before I answer, which is I'm almost 50. Maybe I know, maybe I don't. I certainly don't know.
You've got an academic understanding
of Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries ought to be doing. I know for my students for sure. To some degree. But here I think is the fundamental thing is it comes down to respect, which is when the Mamdani movement started happening, which whatever you think of Mamdani, it's a movement. The dismissive nature followed by the pearl clutching fear, as opposed to respect. Respect is engage because people have something worthwhile to bring. And I believe that the innovators, young or old, by the way, we could see older innovators too, but the people who are on the edge trying to do something deserve our respect. They don't deserve our deference. They don't deserve a red carpet rolled out so that they could do whatever they want, because we see what happens when that happens in tech and elsewhere. But if it's me, it's like deeply and fundamentally asking, are you placating? Are you engaging out of fear, or do you respect? And my goal is sit there, whether it's with an innovative labor organizer, an innovative entrepreneur, or just somebody frustrated trying to figure out what to do, and try to meet them at a place of respect. I don't know that I'm always successful. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm not. But that, to me, is the quest, because being seen is the first step toward being powerful.
Mm-hmm. All right, brother, we're at time. Thank you so much for spending time with me, man. And thank you, more importantly, all the work you're doing to try to create an America with more empowered people, with more collective power.
I appreciate it, and I see us as allies in that. And if folks out there want to ask questions or engage, I'm easy to find on the internet.
All right, brother. I'll see you soon. Wait, where can they find you? Actually, now that you said that, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is one place you can reach out to me. Twitter, I'm on every Twitter, Blue Sky.
At Roy Bahat. Did you get the best?
At Roy Bahat on all the things. But literally type my name in, and if I don't show up on the other end, our venture firm is the most transparent. Our website is literally our operating manual for our fund, and so it should not be hard to find me.
Right on. All right, cool, brother. Thanks for the time, man.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Fun. Bye.
Later, brother.